Gary Chief of Police Wade Ingram is stepping down, and Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson has appointed Larry McKinley, a 15-year veteran of the Gary Police Department, in his stead. Mayor Freeman Wilson has given no reason for the sudden departure of Wade Ingram, but says that Chief McKinley has the temperament, vision, and integrity to lead the Gary Police Department into the future. Chief McKinley has called veteran police captain Tom Papadakis out of retirement to serve as his deputy chief. The announcement was made during a press conference in which the mayor addressed new initiatives to deal with the uptick of violent crime in Gary, including the murder of Gary police officer Jeffrey Westerfield. Reporter Hillary Powell spoke with the mayor following the announcement, and she'll have more on that story later in our show. The man charged with killing Officer Westerfield, Carl Blount, was in a Crown Point courtroom this week where he pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder. Blount is scheduled to be back in court on September 17th. Charges have been filed this week in two high-profile cases in Northwest Indiana. Robbery and attempted murder charges have been brought against Joseph Pleasure and Ellen Ross for the Hammond shootings of Maria Arceo and her daughters, 15-year-old Mariah and 12-year-old Alyssa. Murder charges have also been brought against 17-year-old Alyssa Barrett for the Crown Point murder of her mother, Carol Delaney Kane. The charges come weeks after similar charges were filed against Barrett's boyfriend, Demarius Wren of Merrillville. Delaney Kane's body was found in Gary on July 7th in the trunk of her abandoned vehicle. Police reports indicate witnesses frequently heard Barrett speak of her desire to rob and kill her mother. In April of this year, Lake Station Mayor Keith Soderquist and his wife Deborah were indicted on federal charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, theft of funds from Lake Station accounts, and filing false tax returns. This week, Soderquist's attorney, Scott King, alleged that Soderquist is being framed. King's claims hinge on a single invoice showing a lumber purchase charged to the city of Lake Station on behalf of Soderquist Construction. A city employee, Street Superintendent James Moss, says he made the routine purchase at a Portage Menards for repairs to a city-owned trailer and had it billed to the Lake Station account. Moss says he does not know why Soderquist Construction is listed as the purchaser. The Lake Station police have contacted the Porter County Sheriff's Office requesting a formal investigation. In statewide news, Indiana Governor Mike Pence is expressing his profound concern to President Obama regarding the placement of unaccompanied immigrant children in Indiana homes. In a letter sent to the president this week, Pence says he was informed through media reports that more than 200 children had been placed with sponsors in Indiana after illegally crossing into the country without their parents. Pence calls on the federal government to quickly resolve the immigration crisis along the country's southern border. The governor goes on to ask that the children be reunited with their families in their native country. Also this week, the governor traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with federal officials regarding a different matter, health care. Governor Pence met with Health and Human Services Secretary Sylvia Matthews Burwell regarding the state's request to expand the Healthy Indiana Plan, or HIP. According to Pence, the expanded version, known as HIP 2.0, is based on a consumer-driven model and requires participants to contribute to a health savings account. While the governor acknowledges that differences remain, he's hopeful that federal officials will grant the waiver to continue the plan. A spike in crime in one Northwest Indiana city has officials looking at holistic answers to a high murder rate. Hillary Powell shows how public officials and community members are reacting to Gary's recent spate of violent crime.
Recent heinous crimes in the region which made national news are everyday events on the local level. That's the message Gary Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson declared this week. She says violent crime should not be commonplace. Some experts even consider Gary's crime a public health concern. I spoke with residents and experts about how 20 murders this year have affected residents for the worse. The city of Gary is suffering by expert diagnosis, infected with a string of shootings this year. There were 20 murders in the first 6 months, according to the Gary Police Department.
I love my city. I support it. I don't personally like the shootings.
Certainly one homicide is too many.
Violence is always a public health concern. When you're dead, I don't think you can get more health conscious than that.
It's a public health problem, but one treated by officers and community members, not just doctors.
Public safety officers, the city administration, everybody, the social services agencies, the school systems, all coming together and looking at this as a community issue.
Danita Johnson-Hughes is the president and CEO of Edgewater Behavioral Services. She says area violence is a public health concern because it affects the masses.
Because that undergirds everything. If your community is not healthy, it's not going to be healthy in any other way. Crime's going to be high.
In 2013, Gary's homicide rate was 64 per 100,000 residents. This week, the mayor set new crime-fighting initiatives, including hiring 14 new officers and appointing a new police chief, Larry McKinley, after announcing Chief Wade Ingram's resignation.
We've had some significant challenges, but the good news is that we are focused on what we can do to improve the state of violence in our community. It's about how safe you feel. It's about how you grow old and whether you have the opportunity to do that in your own community.
Answering the call to make streets safer is the Gary Police Department, which McKinley says is underpaid and still mourning the death of a fellow officer shot to death on the job, Officer Jeffrey Westerfield.
There are three immediate issues that I will work to resolve within the first 90 days as Chief of Police. The first is improving morale in the department.
There's also public morale to contend with. The mayor says in the past 60 days, the residents of Gary have seen some of the most brazen crimes the city has seen in decades, including a May 2014 shooting death of a man in this McDonald's parking lot, just steps from the Methodist Hospital and less than a fourth of a mile from the Gary Police Department.
It happened in the middle of the day. It happened at one of the community centers. It happened in a place where a lot of children live, in those apartments across from the McDonald's.
Officer Hudson, here.
The city logged just over one murder a week in 2013 with 54 homicides according to police data. And Johnson-Hughes says what happens to the body affects the mind.
You cannot separate the head from the body. Those types of stressors can lead to mental, emotional, psychological problems.
Centers for Disease Control research presented at an April 2012 congressional briefing states children in high crime zones like Gary are essentially living in combat zones. Unlike soldiers, some young people can't exit the embattled zone when it's their own neighborhood.
Particularly when you're looking at a community like Gary. Kids going in and coming from school who somehow get involved or witness situations of violence, shootings and that sort of thing. And so PTSD can be associated with those kinds of things.
Health officials say increasing spending for a community like Gary, with 37% of residents below poverty level, can help provide resources to be preventative against violence.
From a public health funding standpoint, Indiana ranks about $15 compared to the national average of $60 per capita funding.
17-year-old Marisha Bailey of Gary says after graduating from the New Innovative Institute, she plans to leave her hometown.
It's not a safe environment. Not only are we killing off our youth, but we're killing off people that God had plans for the future.
Freeman Wilson continues to stress for the public to hold city officials accountable on crime-fighting initiatives. Well, another Northwest Indiana city is holding itself accountable to area commuters. Steve Walsh spoke to Valparaiso Mayor John Costas about the possibilities for a new tool to make residents more mobile.
While most of Northwest Indiana has either lost or scaled back bus service, Valparaiso has moved ahead with its own city service and a commuter line to Chicago. They're now announcing the area's first transit-oriented development. Talk about it, we have Valparaiso Mayor John Costas. Mayor, welcome.
Glad to be here, Steve.
So, Valparaiso has invested a lot in bus service and its ties to Chicago, basically. Are you concerned at all? Is some of this trying to get ahead of a South Shore extension in Lake County, that you're going to have Dyer and some of those communities hooked up to train service maybe in the next few years?
Well, what we're talking about is the Chicago Dash, which is a service that we started in 2008, which is an express bus service from downtown Valparaiso into the Loop. That has grown exceedingly over the last 5 years to where we have about 130, 140 riders a day. We see the bus service as a complement to the train service. Personally, I agree that the extension to Munster and Dyer is great because of the population around there. But the bus service actually works better for us because we don't have the concentration that justifies the extension of the train at this time.
But we've seen a shift in population more towards Porter County over the last several years. Are you concerned that if you have that kind of transit, you're going to see a shift back towards Dyer and Munster and Crown Point?
Yeah, not really, because each county and city has its own amenities, and we're simply trying to find the transportation systems that work best for us. And we really focus on sustainability so that it makes economic sense. And so for us, the buses seem to be working great, and in a sense, we're priming the pump for a train that may come 10, 20 years down the road. But we don't see that happening because we don't think it's economically justifiable really in the next 10 to 20 years until the population grows more.
So you're not so much worried about having train service in Valparaiso, but this transit-oriented development, where is it and how does it work? And why do it that way?
Well, transit-oriented developments you see them a lot on the East Coasts as the trains push further into the suburbs. This is the area that develops around the train, and because people like to live near transportation, to walk to transportation, and so it's about planning well around new centers. So for us, we've outgrown the current bus station, and so we need to build a new one to accommodate the growth. And so rather than just build a new parking lot, we want to build a station that does a number of things, that is on a rail line so that in the future, if the rail does come, we have a station there on the rail. But at the same time, it also, we have planned a large area around this, which includes, for instance, high-density housing, maybe a hotel, high-density single-family housing, some retail, and that sort of thing, so people can live and walk to transportation and have access to Chicago, because that's really what this is all about, connecting with that huge economic engine we call Chicago.
So who's going to pay for all this?
Well, it's partnerships. For instance, our V-Line, which is our intra-city bus service, which has been very, very successful, is a partnership between us and the university. So that makes it very sustainable. In this case, this is, of course, a project that has many phases to it. So the first phase is really focused on building a new transit, acquiring the land, building a new transit center, putting in the roads to that transit center. So this is the first phase of it.
And the city's going to pay for that? The RDA?
Yeah, we've asked for a grant from the RDA of approximately, somewhere around 10 to 12 to 13 million to really for that infrastructure alone.
All right. But unfortunately, that's about all the time we have for this. We'll keep following this both on TV and the radio. But in the meantime, this has been Valparaiso Mayor John Costas.
Glad to be here.
Thanks, Steve. A potential change in the Clean Water Act could have a major impact in and around Lake Michigan. Reporter Elizabeth Wang files this report from the nation's capital.
Outdated sewer systems and old infrastructure plague many Great Lakes cities. As populations grow, sewer overflow is increasingly becoming a major contaminant of the Great Lakes.
Wastewater treatment facilities can't handle that amount of water, so they often have to discharge water that is mixed with rainwater and raw sewage into tributaries, rivers, or into Lake Michigan or the other Great Lakes themselves in order to protect their wastewater treatment plants.
Chad Lord says his Healing Our Waters Coalition also is working on the Great Lakes Water Protection Act. That would hold the public treatment facilities accountable for any sewer overflow and require curbs on contamination starting in 2033.
These are very expensive projects, as you can imagine. They're very complicated logistically, tearing up city streets, replacing water pipes, improving and updating wastewater treatment facilities. Many communities just don't have the money to do that.
The scenic Great Lakes are an economic engine that is easily threatened by any perceived health risks.
We use our waterways for recreation. And recreation is good for mental and physical well-being, and it's also good for our economies.
For now, experts recommend some easier fixes such as installing green roofs that absorb rainwater, perforated tilings that allow water to flow through streets and into soil beds, and more trees and plants. From Washington, D.C., Elizabeth Wang, Lakeshore Report.
The quality of life for America's furry friends is a cause of concern for many animal welfare advocates. According to the American Kennel Club, dogs are a part of nearly half of all U.S. families, but overpopulation in many local shelters remains a problem. While legislators and regulators look for ways to address the issue, many communities rely on volunteers to help homeless animals. Here in Northwest Indiana, 2 groups are teaming up to use their skills to transfer animals from death row to loving homes. 2 very special guests arrived at the Porter County Airport this week on a private flight from Kentucky. Canines Sasha and Hank are Great Pyrenees mixes. As large breed neglected dogs, both were facing certain death at a shelter in Kentucky with a high euthanasia rate. After seeing pictures of the dogs online, the volunteers at Giant Paw Prints Rescue in Valparaiso stepped in to save their lives.
This group was created by Kathy Nolan. She had worked for other organizations in the region area, and she met a dog named Gibby, who was a very special needs dog. He suffered from separation anxiety, and they couldn't help him, so she took him in.
The Humane Society of the United States estimates that as many as 2.7 million companion animals are euthanized in shelters each year. Volunteer-based groups such as Giant Paw Prints often step in to take animals to foster homes until they can be adopted.
Within 7 to 10 days, they'll be taken to Dr. Rachel Jones for a complete physical, to see about their meds, to see if they have any advanced medical problems.
The time and funding needed to transport the dogs over land can quickly drain the resources of a small nonprofit. That's led a different group of volunteers to offer their unique services.
I love dogs, and I love being able to rescue these animals and get them to some new homes.
Jason Christensen works with Pilots and Paws. By teaming up with rescue organizations, volunteer pilots can quickly move dogs like Sasha and Hank to a new home.
I, as a pilot and a member, within my certain radius, get an email notification, and if I can do it, I chime in, and then we coordinate the flights and make it happen.
Groups like the Purdue Veterinary School warn that with little regulation, not all rescue groups are created equal. Volunteers and potential pet owners should research the organization before becoming involved.
Most of our volunteers have knowledge with special needs dogs, like Jano has the diabetic dog. Well, some dogs are beat severely, and a lot of the foster parents know how to handle that.
Giant Paw Prints works closely with local vet Rachel Jones and an experienced animal trainer to make sure pets are ready to be placed in homes. And new owners go through a multi-step screening process.
Every application has to list 3 references, so we did all 3 references, called their vets, had to do any introductions with if they have any current pets.
Just 1 day later, Sasha, bathed and groomed and on a high-nutrient diet, had already begun to adapt to her new surroundings. She and Hank can now be seen on Facebook and the group's website, awaiting a permanent home.
It's just neat seeing them come from, very skinny, very malnourished, very bad places, and getting to bring them home where they're happy and they see some new folks, just to see them making other people happy too.
It's a great organization, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
As we approach the dog days of summer, there are still plenty of opportunities to enjoy great summertime events around our region. This week, John Kane previews the Michigan City Chamber Music Festival in Eye on the Arts.
Hi, joining me for this edition of Eye on the Arts is Nick Orbovich, the music director of the Michigan City Chamber Music Festival. And Nick, it's nice to have you back this year.
Well, thank you so much for having me back.
The festival is a summer event.
Yes, every summer.
One of the many activities going on at this time of the year. That's great.
That's
so
right.
This is beginning of August.
Right. This year it's August 9th through the 17th.
Okay, and for several days.
Right.
And you have how many people performing?
Oh my gosh, it's about 10 different musicians of very high caliber. caliber professors from major conservatories around the country. And we've been colleagues for many years, and we get together every year to play this great music.
Yeah, and you do so for free.
That's right. All the concerts are free of charge, no ticket reservations required. All the events are free.
And I can't remember, do you perform all in one place or in various locations?
Mostly at the First Presbyterian Church in Michigan City, but we also do one children's concert at the public library, and we have another couple events at different places, all on our website, mccmf.org.
Okay, and you yourself, you're a string player.
Yeah, I'm a violinist and I perform too.
So you get in on it.
Yeah, I get in there, yep.
So what's the repertoire?
This year, our theme is Thinking Big, and we're kind of highlighting, you know, chamber music is small ensembles playing the music of the masters, Brahms, Beethoven, etc. This year, we're looking at how they've stretched that chamber label to the limits. A minimum of a quintet or bigger every night we're featuring. A string quintet by Brahms, piano quintet also. One of the most beloved pieces of chamber music, the Mendelssohn Octet for Strings, is on our Friday night concert. So octet is about as big as you can get for a chamber piece before it becomes an orchestra, you know. So a conductorless, very beautiful, dramatic work. I mean, it's really a sight to behold live.
And to hear.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So you have special programming for children this year as well?
We do. We have 3 concerts for children. One called A Musical Trip to the Zoo, where music about animals, and even where composers will have instruments imitate the sounds of animals. As old music as Vivaldi will have us do that. Another program, A Musical Time Machine, where very educational program and very fun, where we just kind of describe how music has evolved through the different eras. And then a very traditional concert for us where the Michigan City Ecumenical Children's Choir performs, and also some other student instrumentalists. That's always a very popular concert.
Well, thank you for being here to tell us about it. Good luck with the festival.
Thank you so much, John.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Eye on the Arts.
Eye on the Arts is made possible in part by South Shore Arts, the Indiana Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency.
To see more of John Kane's story or any of our stories, you can go to lakeshorepublicmedia.org and just click on the tab. We've got some other wonderful events coming up in Northwest Indiana. A big one, Lake County Fair is huge, and we're going to be very much involved with that.
We will. Lakeshore Public Media is sponsoring an entertainment tent. The Showcase Tent, I believe, is its official name, but it will be up near one of the entrances there near the 4-H building. You can stop by. Tom Lounges, host of Midwest Beat on our sister radio station, 89.1 FM. He'll be out there all week. Lots of great acts he'll be chatting with. There will be some live radio broadcasts throughout the week, and perhaps Jump in the Lake
Jump in the Lake, maybe taking on the Lake County Fair. That's entirely possible.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be my first Lake County Fair, so I'm
Well,
really
it's about
excited to get
time.
into
It's a big
it.
deal.
I
You got to
cannot
get on
wait.
board.
Do you have a favorite fair food?
Corn, definitely the fried corn, but anything, and then they always do the new fried food, so I always
Everything fried.
Take a dip in that.
I think last
Speaking
year
of food, oh, I'm so
we did a
sorry.
story on the deep fried gumballs. You could get a gumball deep fried. Yes, very interesting.
Very interesting. Hillary, speaking of food, I know you're working on a story next week that's food related.
Yes, more a turn up focusing on healthy food options in the region, particularly in Gary. Methodist Hospital has an initiative going on to make sure that residents have greater access to healthy food options.
And Sarah, what are you working on for next week?
Well, I'll be talking with NIPSCO about a program they have that's designed to help their professional women to network with one another and to develop in a traditionally male-dominated kind of industry.
Very important.
So,
And if you have any ideas for a story that you'd like us to take a look at, we want to hear from you. Send your thoughts, concerns, questions to tvfeedback@lakeshorepublicmedia.org. We want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next week on Lakeshore Report.